We're going to do a recap of the workshop that we did last weekend. I hope for anyone who's been in this group any amount of time, you all know that my framework that I've created, my 5-step system or so to help women transition as quickly and as painlessly as possible. I'm not saying it won't be, I'm not saying it will be easy, but I call it the magnetic pivot framework. And the reason I call it the magnetic pivot framework is because using certain tactics, including LinkedIn, being strategically visible, there are ways to at least set up your LinkedIn profile so that you can attract attention from recruiters or what have you, or even when you're putting out applications and going through that process and actually, going through the application process. It's very important that you have a visible LinkedIn profile when you're making a non-clinical transition. We typically don't really use LinkedIn, of course, when we're getting our clinical jobs. I don't know if anyone listening has used LinkedIn to connect with anyone for a clinical position. I mean, you certainly can, because people in those corporate hiring positions are likely going to be on LinkedIn, and you can still connect with them that way. But most of us use other channels for our first clinical job. But when it comes to shifting into the non-clinical arena and shifting into more of a corporate position like in or biotech consulting or research or pharma, those hiring managers are going to be on LinkedIn. And when they hire recruiters or their in-house recruiters, in addition to obviously looking internally, they're going to also be looking at LinkedIn, or at least when you apply, they'll be checking your LinkedIn. So just to recap, for those of you who haven't had a chance or may not ever have a chance to catch the replay, because I know everybody is busy, I just had Notebook LM, which is a Google AI, take my framework and turn it into this beautiful infographic. So for those of you out there who make content, DM me if you want to know how to do this. A lot of us start out feeling burnt out. I know I did. Now, not everyone is burnt out. And if you're not burnt out, it's okay. You can still transition. But a lot of us do have some sort of event that sparks our desire to transition, either burnout, motherhood, a shift in priorities, personal illness of a close family member. For me, I had both burnout and illness of a parent. So I had the two kind of happen at the same time, because trouble comes in pairs. So things do tend to happen more than one thing at a time. So there were a couple of reasons that for me, continuing the practice of full-time clinical medicine didn't feel like something I wanted to continue doing at the time. And a lot of you are coming to that conclusion, or have come to that conclusion, or you're already on the other side in your non-clinical life, even if that does include some clinical practice. So a lot of us start off with burnout. If you look here at the left, on the left side of the screen, it has burnout. What I recommend, my framework starts with, first of all, clarity, because some of you may know there's a saying, don't jump out of the frying pan into the fire. And I don't want the women in this group to jump out of the frying pan, jump out of one uncomfortable situation just into another. And that's not to say that if you pivot, the first job may not be your dream job. It might not be. You might get there, and perhaps it's not your dream job, because we never really know until we get there. But with this framework, you never have to be stuck again, whether you're clinical or non-clinical. So clarity, what are you moving toward? We want to be methodical. We want to really think about that. If we're burned out, we want to start healing from that burnout, because as my coach says, everywhere we go, there we are. So if we are burned out and we haven't healed yet, then we're going to take our same smoldering ashes over to our non-clinical job. So you don't have to be completely healed before you pivot, but you definitely want to be addressing the burnout, because that's important. You want to have clarity. You want to not just jump out of the frying pan into the fire, but we want to have an idea not just of what we're leaving, but what we're moving toward. And I like to have my clients focus on the life of their dreams, what they want for themselves now, and and release themselves to be able to want something different. And it's okay if at 40 we want something different from what we wanted at 20, or if life looks a little different and we just want to make some other decisions, that's fine. But I think at the same time, we have to know, okay, what kind of lifestyle am I moving toward? Do I care about weekends? Do I want to make sure I have most or all weekends off? Am I willing to work holidays, select holidays here and there? Do I want to make sure I can catch Pilates in the evening every day? Do I want to make sure I can have a lunch hour where I can go pick my kids up after school? You're just kind of focusing on what it is you want. And then there's the preparation stage. I think, as we're making the decision to pivot, as we're gaining clarity and deciding what we're moving toward, we definitely need to prepare. One book I always recommend, because I believe in supporting women physicians and physician entrepreneurs, is this book, 50 Non-Clinical Careers for Physicians by Dr. Sylvie Stacy. I gave a few of these away last year during one of our events when we were celebrating, I think, hitting 200 members. You can get this right off of Amazon, and it's really great just to give you an idea of the different career options that are available. I also have a little guide that is very up to date, based on stats over the last year, giving you ideas for salary ranges. Obviously, the salary will vary depending on the employer. But hey, at the end of the day, we are working in part to pay our bills. So you definitely want to know, especially going from a clinical salary, you want to know about where you're going to land so that you can plan accordingly. Some may get a raise when they transition. Some may have to, may take a little bit of a pay cut. Some may make a lateral move. When I moved from being a hospitalist to research, it was lateral as far as my pay structure was different, but the total take home was the same. But yeah, so we want to do our preparation. What do we want to do? Make a short list, top three fields we'd be interested in. If there's one, fine. If there's three, that's fine too. And then from there, once we kind of hone in and have an idea of what we want to do and what we want to pivot to, at that point, that's when you're going to want to start working on the LinkedIn, getting that CV translated to a resume. And I can remember listening to John Jerica's podcast. I binged that podcast. Thanks, John Jerica. It really helped me to pivot. And also the Doctors Crossing and Marjorie Stiegler's podcast. One of our own group members, Dr. Bertina, she has a podcast that she's just starting. I also have some materials on YouTube, but I was listening. And that's when I really realized that there was a process where you're moving from that clinical CV to a non-clinical resume. And that's big because when you're going into non-clinical, you're going to have people who are not physicians who are screening and looking at your resume. So it becomes very important to be able to recognize and translate and communicate those skills that you've gotten as a physician and how they apply to that position. And one thing I remember hearing John Jerica say in his podcast was, remember, they are looking for doctors and they know they have to pay doctors. So, you're not going to be transitioning into, a field where you're not getting six figures or what have you. So you are at least going to be paid in the range of a doctor. Now, depending on your specialty, it may go down a little bit, just depends. It depends on your situation. So yes, we want to move from a CV to a resume. We want to get that linked. And this is the key. Once you get that CV, convert it to a resume, or once you start that process, go ahead and at the same time, because we don't have to be perfect to move forward. Go ahead and start updating that LinkedIn. Start walking through that process. And before I came on, I was getting some updates from ChatGPT as to what things have changed and what things are important on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, like everyone else, is leaning more and more on AI. So it's really more important than ever that you have the right keywords in your LinkedIn profile so that when hiring managers and recruiters are searching on LinkedIn, your profile is coming up. And that includes your headline, that includes your about section, your skills. If you have any special non-clinical certifications or things that you want to show off, you can put them in the featured section. I think you may have to have LinkedIn premium for the featured section. I'm not sure. I'll fact check that later, but There's a featured section. So say you've gotten a PI certification or some certification in physician advisory or UM, go ahead and put that in your features section and update your skills. And so even if you go back and fine tune it after you get that actual resume in hand, you don't have to wait till you have that formal resume in order to start working on that LinkedIn. For those of you who are employed and you might be worried about, oh, my boss is going to see, go look your boss up. I bet they've got a LinkedIn. So, you deserve to have a LinkedIn too. At the very least, at least you deserve to have your profile filled out. I mean, that's not going to do anyone any harm. That was one of the first things I did when I worked with a resume writer, and I'm pretty sure my boss didn't notice for the most part, most likely. Phase 3, we want to start connecting. And, this is important, especially if you're going for a more competitive non-clinical type of career in pharma. I know pharma is kind of its own unique animal right now, but regardless, you want to start buffing up that network. I would say start building with people who from medical school. Some of them might be non-clinical. Start looking at target companies, and LinkedIn will show you whether or not anyone who works there is an alumnus from your schools or has something in common with you. So start there, building your network. And from there, even LinkedIn will start suggesting people who will be strategic connections for you. And so you want to start connecting. When you apply for a job, if the job has the name of the hiring manager, reach out. I don't know so much about connecting with that person, because then they'll be, from now on, they can see everything you're doing on LinkedIn. So you might want to think about that one, but at least you can reach out. You can send them a message, or at least connect while you're doing your job search, with them, and start, a conversation. It doesn't hurt. It's not going to hurt. Everybody's just people at the end of the day. And then number 4, taking action, and just remembering that every baby step counts. Everything that you do counts, so if your post call, you've been up all night and you decide, okay, I think I want to take 5 minutes, just come up with your headline, go in AI, have it spit out a headline for you, even if it's not perfect. Switch up your headline, go to bed, So these little baby steps that we take, they add up, and you never know when that one step that you took to beef up your LinkedIn, to redo your about section, is going to draw the attention of just the right person who may have just the right opportunity. So at the very least, it'll make you feel empowered and help you start taking steps to recognize that you are the CEO of your career. And we really are. So that's just a little synopsis. I went more in depth during the workshop, but that's just kind of a brief synopsis of the overall magnetic non-clinical pivot and the steps that I teach. And so just remember, you're the CEO of your career. You are in charge. There are a lot of different ways that you can transition. You don't have to leave clinical, or you can do a hybrid where you're maybe staying PRN at your former hospital or facility and, taking on your full-time job. A lot of times the two don't necessarily conflict as far as any conflict of interest. If anything, your non-clinical position probably would like for you to still have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the clinical realm. So a lot of doctors do shifts in urgent care. Obviously it depends on your specialty and how easy it is. For some specialties, it's easier than others to do per diem. Personally, I don't. I just decided not to, but a lot of people I know do per diem shifts, and that's definitely an option. A lot of you, maybe not many of you, but a lot of you do know that I am starting a spring 6-week group coaching cohort for women who want to go ahead and get this done in 2006, who want some support and going methodically through this framework and want a little bit more, smaller community, more intimate setting off social media, where we're going to really dig in and get this stuff done together. Get that LinkedIn going, start applying, start taking steps together with accountability, being organized. If that's something that's of interest to you, the doors of the cohort are open, starting to fill up. I'm so excited. I cannot wait. We start on May 12th, and we're taking signups through May 8th. And it's called the Never Stuck Again cohort, the Never Stuck Again group coaching cohort. And I picked Never Stuck Again because that's something that's so important to me, whether you're clinical or not clinical. A lot of us feel stuck in golden handcuffs. That's one of the biggest issues that we face, because let's face it, you don't wake up and become a doctor overnight. I mean, some people, some of us have been in residencies for almost a decade and have really put a lot of effort, and you've done your MCATs. You've probably had your nose in the book since like elementary school. So this has been a long road. And, but even though our road has been long, it doesn't mean that we're stuck in a path that we decided 20 years ago that might not be quite the right fit or may not be what we expected. It's okay if that's the case. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't have to be the end of our career. It doesn't even have to be the end of our clinical career. We can just do clinical differently. And we have a lot of women in the group who do that. If that's your interest, I could direct you towards some of them. But there's a lot of ways for you to take the reins of your career. So a group of us are going to get together, get this done, move forward. There's a lot of women who want to pivot before the holidays. They want to pivot before their kids go back to school. They don't want to ring in 2027, still in clinical. So if that's you, let me know. I'll put the links below. We're getting on calls, we're getting ready, we're getting warmed up. Otherwise, these resources will be in the group, and I'm going to start trying to do lives again. I used to do them last year, but to be honest, since I started working from home, I'm hardly ever camera ready, so I kind of stopped doing them. But I'm going to put on a little bit of foundation for y'all every now and then. We'll go live. Thank you all for your support. This community is awesome. If you have any friends who you think are considering a pivot or would just be a great fit for the group, bring them on in, because we're about positivity, supporting each other, growing together, and you don't have to completely move from clinical medicine to be part of this group. This is a supportive community and so resourceful. And make sure you're in the WhatsApp group. There's a lot of slightly more intimate conversations happening over there. So, if you want to get in the chat and have a little something to distract you during the day, send out a question here and there, that's really the place to be. And some of our non-clinical ladies in our group have really become mentors over there in the WhatsApp group. So thank you. You all know who you are. Thank you for joining. Drop your questions below. Me and Charmaine will be checking them and we'll get you answers, and download the infographic. I'm going to post it as soon as we're done. All right.